Flosstube friends, my name is Doris and I'm also known as Windy Bay Stitches on Instagram, and I am coming to you today on August 29th and I'm going to share my stitching updates. So if anyone here is stopping by and you're new, welcome and thank you for stopping by, and for folks that have been subscribing or following, thanks for coming back. So it's been quite a while since I last filmed, and that's because I was traveling. My last video I actually shot while on the road. My husband and I were able to go on a 9-week kind of epic road trip from Akron, Ohio down to New Orleans, and then all through the Southwest United States. So we went through Texas and then spent a lot of time in Arizona, plus some brief trips to Vegas and Utah and Colorado, and a little more time in New Mexico, and then back home through the Midwest. So we traveled for 9 whole weeks, and it was just excellent. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to do that. Loved all the scenery. I love the desert and the mountains, and we had the best time hiking and just, visiting some of the smaller towns along with some of the bigger cities, and it was awesome. So in my previous video, I was in New Mexico. I was about 4 weeks in, and I included travel content at the end of that one. For today, I did put together a video with a lot more photographs and short video clips that I had taken. It's fairly long by itself, I think like 12 minutes or so, so I'm actually going to post that as a separate video. And if you're interested in seeing some of the beautiful Southwest scenery and kind of following our journey, feel free to watch that one too. It won't have any stitching content though, so if you're only here for the stitching, then just ignore that one. For today's video, I'm going to share my progress on the projects I took with me. I actually have 3 finishes, one that I didn't take, and then 2 that I worked on during the trip, and I still have a couple whips. And I actually have a lot of haul because, one of the things I did while traveling was try to look up the local shops, and I didn't get to go to all the ones that I hoped I would get to, but I did end up getting to, I think, about 7 different shops and made some great purchases. So I put together some short clips and some photographs from each of those shops. So I'm going to put that towards the end of this video. But for now, let's just jump in and I'll show you my recent finishes. So the first one is the smallest one, and that is Prairie Schooler Santa. I had completed one earlier this year, and the one that I recently finished I actually finished this on the trip. This is the 1987 Santa. And here he is. And I've had so much fun doing these that I decided to go ahead and start another one. I brought one extra one with me on the trip, 1990, which I think is really cute with the woodland animals. And I made a lot of progress on this one because it's, this is the easiest type of stitching to do in the car, and I had a lot of time to do that, so got a good start on him. The other project that I took with me that I worked on a lot in the car, I didn't totally finish it on the trip. I finished it just after we got back home, which was right before Easter. That is called The Good Intentions by Kathy Barrick. So here she is, all finished. The reason I didn't try to finish in the car was her face has some over-one stitching, and then there's some of the details, the needle with the thread and the little sampler with the letter A. I didn't want to try to do those in the hotel or in the car, so I had it almost done and then finished it up back here in Akron. This is the chart, and you might notice just some slight differences. I used all of the recommended colors, but I rearranged them a little bit just to have a little bit less black. So in the chart, all the scissors were supposed to be black. I changed mine to be the darker gray. And then because I used the dark gray on the scissors, I also rearranged the colors on the thread spools, just so that the gray spool wouldn't be so close to all the scissors. But otherwise it's all the same, and it's the recommended threads, which were needlepoint silks. And this was the first, I guess, recent large project that I've done with silks. And I know, some folks are scared of silks, or just never try the silks. They are certainly more expensive than cotton flosses, but I will say they're very nice to work with. They're very soft. They don't tangle easily. They lay very nicely. So I did enjoy working with those. And one of my other whips is also with needlepoint silk, and I'll show you that in a minute. First, I'll show you my other finish, which is actually this. It's a little sampler piece it was from a kit by Better Homes and Gardens. That was the pattern. It is, you know, it's an older kit and it's a little bit dated in terms of the color selections, you know, the pinks and blues. I like those colors. I used to have, you know, some of those colors in my house that I owned, you know, back in the 90s. Now, you know, they're not so trendy anymore, but I think the sampler is very pretty. I did use the recommended colors. It was actually the kit that came with it. I ran out of one of them, but I was able to match it up and finish it off. So here it is. You know, it's quite a tall, thin piece. So I'm looking forward to, you know, doing some kind of a simple finishing treatment with this. I'll probably just mount it on a board and put some kind of fabric behind it that makes the colors pop even more, and put that up in with some of our family photos. So that is my third finish, so not too bad for being on the road. And you know, the video I made in January, I talked a lot about how I was attempting to tackle some of my harder projects, things that I've been procrastinating on that maybe had more complicated stitching, or, you know, not just cross stitch. And of course, while traveling, I wasn't working on any of those. Now that I'm back, I'll try to get focused on those again. Well, first let me show you my other whips from traveling. The other one that I had started and took with me was called Vintage Stars by Jeanette Douglas, and it's a Quaker style pattern. I think it's really pretty. This is the other one that is using needlepoint silks, and I made a fair amount of progress on this on the trip. I've actually been working on it quite a bit the last 4 or 5 days, and so I've gotten in more of these Quaker type patterns. I'll try to hold this close so you can see. This one, it's a lower count linen, but I'm doing it over one with 2 strands, which is actually making it's a little bit tight, but it's very nice. It gives it a little more of a puffy look to it and makes the colors look pretty vibrant. So I think it's going to come out very well. So I'm definitely going to keep going with that one. These are all the threads, and they're pretty nice mix of colors, not too bright, but there's, you know, some fairly saturated colors that I like a lot in this one. So I'm going to keep going on that. This one actually wasn't as good to work on in the car, so I thought this was going to be the best one for the car. Actually, the Good Intentions was better. So that one didn't get as much time while traveling. One other piece I started, and I showed this during my travel update. And this is a sampler by Bees Needleworks, and this is a project I'm doing actually with the local EGA chapter that I joined recently. And I mentioned before, this is kind of a teaching project. So the idea is that each section of the tree is a different specialty stitch. So I've done about 5 of the specialty stitch sections so far, and I'm gonna keep going on that. We're just working on this at our own pace, and I'm using fall colors, which will make it look like a nice fall tree. And the next couple stitches I have coming up, there's one called Jerusalem Stitch and Norwich Stitch. And some of these, you know, I've never heard of. So this is it's a very good teaching project, and it's manageable. I mean, generally once I kind of study the stitch and I get started, I am able to finish the whole section within, you know, 1 or 2 hours. So try to finish them in one sitting. So those are the whips from the trip that I'm still going on. One other whip I thought I'd share today is the third of the more difficult projects that I'm trying to tackle, which are EGA projects. And as I mentioned this, not in my last video, but the previous one from January, this is ambrosia honey. And when I last gave an update on this one, I had finished all the pearl cotton stitching and the outline stitching in the honeycomb. And the next step was to start beading. And so I did start beading in January before I left. And I got a lot of the beads in, so hopefully you can see them. All the centers of the donuts are beaded. There's a little bit of beads in the pomegranates. There are beads along the ribbon. And there are the bright yellow beads here in the fishtails, I think these are called. And I started on the bee. There are some beads added to the wings to make them a little more sparkly. And I was also working on the lattice. I was beading this, and unfortunately I ran out of these beads in my kit. And so then a friend from the Guild in Virginia very graciously sent me her extra beads, but they arrived while I was gone, and when I got home I looked at them, and unfortunately they're not actually the same bead. So I called the shop directly that made these kits for us, and the person there was super helpful, and she said, yeah, unfortunately we had the supplier gave us 2 different types of beads, so depending when your kit was assembled you might have had a different bead. So she offered to send me more of the beads that I actually need, which are a little lighter in color. So I'm waiting for those to come in the mail. Once I get those, I can finish out the lattice. Hopefully they're going to match. If they don't, I'm, unfortunately going to end up having to take out all the beads I already put in and start over again on the lattice. Once those are in and I finish the bee, all I have left is some of the stitching around the outer edge, some type of a canvas work stitch, and then I'll be ready to send this off for framing. So this will be the third of my 5 larger, more challenging EGA projects that I resolved that I would finish this year. So my first shopping outing on this trip was in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was on a day that was very cold and very rainy, and we had just had enough of trying to walk around outside and see things, and Beale Street was kind of dead, and so we drove a little ways out away from downtown and went to a shop called Stitchers Inc. It's a combination needlepoint and cross stitch shop. And I didn't actually take any pictures. I guess the weather was just so bad, and it was also pretty close to their closing, so I didn't stay there too long. But it was a nice shop, and I enjoyed talking with the owner a little bit. And while I was there, I picked up just this very large project bag, which I put into use immediately for one of my whips. These bags are really practical for, they're good size and they're sturdy, and they're also waterproof, so very good for traveling with. And the other thing I picked up there was this hands-on design chart, Grab Life with both hands, and it's got a fun crab, and this will be a good addition to, I have a lot of finished pieces which are lighthouses or beach themed, or so this will fit in with those. The next shopping I did was in New Orleans. In the French Quarter, there's a shop called the Quarter Stitch, and that shop I had heard of, and I'd written it down. I wasn't actually specifically looking for it the day. We were just wandering around and happened to turn down the street, and there it was. So I did go and stop in, and I've got a few pics which I will insert. And I'm also sharing what I bought that day. So I wanted to show you, I still have it wrapped up because this was actually during Mardi Gras. It was the week and a half prior to Fat Tuesday, and that weekend is called Mini Gras, and there are a lot of parades scheduled that weekend, and the city's decked out, and it's fun. It's a good way to experience Mardi Gras without the massive crowds of Fat Tuesday. So I bought one pattern there, and they wrapped it up so cute. I don't know if they do this all the time or if it was just because it was Mardi Gras. But I really appreciated the wrapping, and I kept it wrapped up all these weeks since I wanted to show it to y'all. But now I'll pull it out so I can show you the pattern. This is the card for the shop. And the pattern I bought is for a Mardi Gras style mask. And it even came with a strand of beads, which is kind of fun. So after our time in New Orleans, we started heading more westerly, and we went into Texas, and we actually spent 17 days in Texas, and we visited a lot of the bigger cities and some smaller towns, and there are some great shops in Texas that I had been hoping to visit. I know there's one in San Antonio, and there's one in Houston, and we went to those places, but unfortunately I didn't plan very well, and it kept working out that the day that we would be sort of passing through the area where the shop was located, it was closed. It was either too early in the morning, or it was Sunday, or so I realized I just didn't plan it as well, and we were meeting up with someone in Houston, and we didn't, we couldn't, our schedule wasn't quite as flexible, so sadly I missed actually all of the needlework shops that I potentially could have visited in Texas. But the one exception is I did go to the Texas Quilt Museum, which is in a town called La Grange. It's kind of in between Austin and San Antonio. And that museum is really lovely. I definitely recommend to stop there if you have the chance. They had an amazing exhibit of award-winning quilts. They were sort of large wall-hanging size quilts, and there were winners from all over the U.S. and some from international as well. And they allowed very limited photo taking inside the museum. In fact, their policy was you could only take a picture of your favorite quilt at the end. So that meant exactly one picture per person on the inside. But the outside is very nice as well. It's a neat small town. And so I'll insert a few of the pictures that I did take at the museum here. So after viewing all the quilts and taking our limited pictures, I picked up a couple of things in their small gift shop, and one of them is this collectible pin for the Quilt Museum. I only own a few pins, but I thought this was actually probably a good one to get in case I expand that collection in the future. And I also bought this really cute turtle pin cushion that has a little bit of needlework on the top and some nice pattern fabrics on the bottom. So I thought he was a great little craft. And I actually have a thing for collectible turtles. I have about 85 small collectible turtles down in my family room, and maybe I'll show a picture of those someday, but maybe not today. And after the Quilt Museum, we wandered around the town of LaGrange a little bit, and we stopped at another shop which is called the Quilted Skein, and that's mainly a yarn shop, knitting shop. But it was very fun to look in there as well. And I actually bought this. This was on clearance, and it's so cute. It's a little hedgehog pin cushion. And we actually have been a hedgehog family in the past. My daughter, who's a grad student now, had asked for a hedgehog, for many, many years in a row, and we finally indulged her and got her a pet hedgehog when she was in high school. And the hedgehog was with us for about 6 years, which is quite a long time for a hedgehog. He was really a beautiful little animal. His name was Gimli, and I might even insert a picture of him for your viewing pleasure. He's no longer with us. He did pass on a couple years ago, but we enjoyed our time with him. So it's fun when I do occasionally see people stitching hedgehogs, and I know Buckeye Stitcher is working on hers, so I'm hoping she does finish it. I have stitched one small hedgehog in the past, and maybe I'll pull that out sometime. The hedgehog also came with a set of pins. All right, so no needlework shops in Texas, but I did have, saw some really beautiful quilts, and not just at the museum, but I would say quilting is just huge in Texas. Almost everywhere you go, you'll see quilt examples. We saw some at the rodeo in Houston that were competition winners, and we saw them in just a lot of different places. We stopped at one little quilt shop and down in a tiny little town outside of Big Bend National Park, and I definitely, everywhere we went in Texas, we kept encountering quilts in different forms, so definitely a big quilting state. So the next stitching opportunity happened in Vegas. We drove all the way to Vegas. That was our furthest point on the trip, and it happened in Vegas, and it doesn't have to stay in Vegas. It was excellent. I went to a shop called Stitcher's Paradise, and it was by far the friendliest shopping stop that I made, because I walked in and there was some ladies stitching at the table up front, and someone there actually recognized me from Flosstube. And she was super friendly, and I enjoyed chatting with her and met her friends that day, and as well as the person working in the shop. And her name is Brenda Holzman, and she is on Instagram. So if you're watching, Brenda, hello, and loved meeting you there, and really loved visiting the shop too. I think Stitcher's Paradise possibly was my favorite shop the whole trip. I mean, partly because it was just so friendly, but also it was really fun to browse there because they had a lot of good inventory. It wasn't a huge space, but they have a back room that is has tall racks with file folder type, vertical file folders that are just stuffed full of charts, and they're labeled by the designer, and you can just take all the time you want and hang out in the back room and pull the folders down and then pull all the charts for that designer and just take your time flipping through them. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to spend at the shop, but I really enjoyed, sort of searching through while I was there, and I found some good stuff in the back. I found 2 Prairie Schooler charts. I got Just Hatched and PQR from the alphabet. And I also found this nice set of Just Nan turtle themed things. So as I said, I have a thing for turtles, so I got this painted turtle pocket, where you stitch the little pocket and you can slide the turtle into it, and I got the little turtle thread winder too, plus the pin, turtle pin. So that was a great find, and I picked up a few threads, or a couple threads there too. So probably my favorite shopping stop on the whole trip. And here's some pictures. So after the side trip to Vegas for a few days, we went back to Arizona and we stayed in Mesa, which I requested specifically so that I could go visit Attic Needlework and Collectibles. And of course, everyone has heard of that shop. It is an absolutely stunning, beautiful shop. It's quite large. They have a wonderful collection of samplers. I think that's their specialty, is the reproduction samplers. So I spent, and part of one afternoon just browsing the shop, looking at all the models. I have a few pictures that I'm gonna post from there. I didn't actually do as much shopping there, and I didn't actually get to talk to folks as much there. The day I visited, the shop was actually quite crowded. There was a fairly large group of, I think they were local stitchers from the Phoenix area that were all kind of crowded around the tables, and they were all, good friends, and I didn't get to interact with them at all. And the folks working were busy with other customers too. So I did look for our Flosstube friend, Stash Sisters, and she was not working that day, so didn't see any familiar faces, but I really enjoyed my visit. I didn't purchase a lot there because I'd already spent quite a bit in Vegas. I did pick up this one chart, which is Homespun Elegance, and it's a combination of embroidery and wool applique. It's called Woolly Squirrels. And I also bought some additional needlepoint silk, which I needed for one of the whips that I had brought on the trip. One of our later stops on the trip was Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have some relatives there, so we planned to spend a couple days there visiting with them. And I thought there's a shop there called the Stitcher's Garden, and I thought that was going to be my very last shopping stop on the trip. And that was a very good shop, very friendly. I did buy a lot of charts there, actually. They had one local option, which is there's a lady named Nancy DeCoco who designs under the name Southwest Decoratives, and she has a lot of patterns which are sharing the art, Navajo Indian art. So she has patterns that look like rugs or some of the other types of images. So I bought two of them. This one is called YEI2. I don't know if you say that as yay or just the letters. I love that one. And I also picked up the one that's more like a rug. That is called Gray Hills. And in addition, I bought some fabric there, and I don't usually shop for sort of custom picked fabric very often, but I had this pattern that I bought last fall, which is the Stoneware Pin Pillows pattern, which is for, it's sort of, these designs are very much like Williamsburg, Virginia salt glaze pottery, which I have also a collection of, and so I wanted to make sure I got the right color fabric to do these smalls, and I found this piece at Stitcher's Garden, and I don't have the manufacturer of the name written down, unfortunately, so I can't share that. They also had a clearance crate that was full of patterns, and I found some good stuff in there, so I'm going to quickly share these as well. I got a Halloween Cat by the Nebby Needle, and a Jenny Bean's Gentle Spring Sampler by Shakespeare's Peddler, and a Homespun Elegance, which is called Delivering Yummy Goodness, and it's an Easter chart. And a La-Di-Da chart called A Big Flower Sampler. And lastly, Carriage House Samplings, Grace McGay's Sampler. So that was a great find and very friendly shop. And so I will insert a few pics here. as I said, I thought that my shopping in Albuquerque was going to be my final shopping of the trip. But after New Mexico, we went to Denver, Colorado to visit friends. And then from there, it was actually time to head on home. And so we were looking at the map, and it's about 20 hours of driving from Denver to Akron. And we had agreed we wouldn't try to push more than 6-7 hours of driving at a time, which plus I had a friend that I wanted to visit in Indianapolis. So we agreed we would stop one night in Indianapolis, and then I needed another stop, actually 2 more stops in between. So we decided to stop in a little town called Abilene, Kansas, and then we also stopped one night in St. Louis. But Abilene was the happy surprise because I picked the town because it was recommended as a small town, and it was supposed to be very walkable, and it had some really nice architecture, and I wanted somewhere that we could, drive all day and then be able to have dinner and then walk around at night. There's also a lot of historical stuff there for Eisenhower, because that was his where he grew up, and there's very nice things to see celebrating his life, and he's actually laid to rest there. But anyway, so we got there, we had dinner, we were walking around. We walked by a bookstore in the downtown area, and I looked over and I saw in the window, there were big letters that said PTP, and it looked like there was linen hanging and another small display that looked needlework related. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, I know what PTP is. That's PictureThisPlus. And so that night, the shop was closed, and I got to my hotel room that night, and I checked online, and sure enough, Abilene, Kansas is the home of PictureThisPlus, and that's actually where they dye their fabrics, and they have a retail store there as well where they sell the fabrics, and they also sell some charts and other needlework stuff. So I negotiated for delaying our departure the next morning so that we could wait until they opened and I could at least stop in for a quick visit. So we went and saw some of the other things in town that morning, including some of the Eisenhower property, and then we ran back downtown, and I got to go in, and I had the best visit there. I met some of the lady working who was sitting at the desk, and their setup is interesting. They're on the lower level of a bookstore, so you enter the bookstore, go down the stairs, you get greeted by the person there, and I'm sorry, I don't know her, I don't recall her name, I'm not sure if I got her name, but she was super friendly, and I browsed around. They have a big table full of fabric, which you'll see in one of my photos, and I picked out a couple fabrics to purchase. And then as I was leaving, she actually offered to take me in the back to have a quick look at their dyeing process. And it was really very interesting. It's just a big room, and there's maybe a crew of 3 or 4 folks working, and it's all just a lot of hand-dyed labor. They get the linen on huge bolts, and they cut it, and then they dye it, one piece at a time in a jar. They have a whole rack full of all the dyes, and they're by hand putting it one piece at a time in a jar and getting the color set right, and then washing it and hanging it and ironing it and so forth. And so it was really impressive to see the volume of linens that they're processing day to day. They had just racks full of orders that were going to be going out. So my hat's off to those ladies for their hard work and the great product that they provide. And I'll show you the 2 that I picked up. I decided to go with fabrics that I could use for Halloween stitching. So I got one called Flash. It's Laguna 28 count. So it's probably maybe a little darker orange than what it's appearing on camera. And the other one I picked up is called Dapple. It's a gray, and it's a 28 count linen. And this is a somewhat larger piece. So that was a really great, unexpected opportunity to visit a small business and support them, and see how they put out the great product that they sell. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the shopping travel content. Now that I'm back home, life's a little quieter now. We've been kind of readjusting to living in a house and not being on the go every day, seeing all these amazing new sites. We were probably we were ready for a break. I will say we were getting a little tired from all the the constant planning and the constant checking in, checking out, and driving and all that stuff. So we're enjoying a break at home now for a while. We'll be in Ohio for I think for at least the next month or so. We are starting to do some more planning for future travels. I've got sort of a year on a page calendar, and I've been starting to kind of pencil in the commitments that we have, and then what all the open blocks of time, and definitely looking forward to planning some additional adventures. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get a little more involved with the local stitching community here in Northeast Ohio. Been to a lot of the shops, and I've recently been joining some of the local guild chapters as well. So I have joined the EGA chapter that I mentioned, and I also joined a group called the Western Reserve Sampler Guild, which is local, and I'm in the process of probably joining Stan Hewitt's Needlework Guild. Stan Hewitt is a local historical property and gardens that is just a lovely mansion, and the grounds are beautiful, and they run a needlework guild there. They do a lot of educational programs, and they actually put on a Stitcher Showcase, which is part of the annual. It's the Ohio Mart Festival is annual, and the Stitcher Showcase I think is every other year. I was able to attend the showcase last year, and if I join that guild, I'll not only get to know some of the other folks, all of whom are members of Stan Hewitt, as well as being members of the guild, and have a little more opportunity to volunteer on that property, and expand my contacts with other stitchers that like to visit Ohio. So looking ahead, I am focusing on some of the local stuff. Flosstube is, it's interesting. I didn't really watch much at all while we were traveling for those 9 weeks. Since I've gotten back, I've been watching a lot more and kind of catching up. And, it's amazing all the activity that's happening. There are so many retreats going on, retreats all over the country. And, a lot of stitchers I can see are getting out and meeting each other more. And that's really great. There's also a lot of collaborations happening. I'm seeing with, Flosstubers promoting some of the online businesses, Etsy sellers, and some of the shops, and more traveling happening. All those things. It's pretty exciting, and of course, Stitch Maynia is also getting lots of attention. And I heard about Stitch Maynia probably starting as long as it's been around. It's at least 2 years, maybe 3 years ago. And I always thought it was a crazy idea, and not one that I would ever participate in, because people sometimes say you're either a process stitcher or a project stitcher. Process stitcher is just enjoying the process and doesn't really matter if they ever finish anything, whereas project stitchers are more focused on finishing. And I'm definitely a project stitcher. But I will say that somebody that I started watching a couple of years ago is Primitive Stitcher, and I'm a big fan of primitive stitchers. And I was so impressed with her first Maynia, because she not only was starting so many new projects, but she was actually finishing them, some of the smaller ones, and not just finishing, but fully finishing. She was, I think a couple of years ago, her first week of Maynia update, she had, maybe 3 different fully finished objects, and they were beautiful. They were just, small ornaments or pillows But I thought that was, kind of inspiring, that, to realize that your Stitch Maynia starts, they don't have to be huge projects. They could actually be something small. So I was pondering, well, is there anything that's really small that I would possibly want to consider doing as Stitch Maynia? And I did actually remember that a couple of years ago, my daughter gave me this pattern, which is the Pokemon ABCs. And it was also a couple of years ago, she came home from college, and she had started playing Pokemon Go, and so she showed us, my husband and I, what it was, and I just took to it. I actually, fun fact about me, being just the big kid that I am, I really like Pokemon Go. I actually still play occasionally. I don't do battles, but I like the idea of just collecting, wandering around and turning the game on and letting it count steps, and then occasionally, catching a Pokemon or two and hitting the stop. So I actually do still play occasionally. I played a little bit while we were traveling, and I'm actually thinking that this pattern, it has a whole alphabet, so 26 different Pokemon, and I could possibly do one per day if I wanted to do some form of Stitch Maynia. So I'm actually possibly going to do this. So I did start pulling some of the DMC threads today, so that might be something else you see in my next update. So with that, I think I'll wrap it up for today. Thank you all for hanging in, and I know it's been kind of a long time between videos, and it's probably honestly going to continue to be probably a month or so in between. am sort of, my energies are a little scattered on different things at this point in life, and I think, 20-minute or so video once a month is probably going to continue to be my pattern. But I know there's no shortage of Flosstubers to watch, so that should fit well with some of your schedule. So if you are not currently subscribed, I would love to have you become a subscriber so you do get updates when I do occasionally post. Or if you're just stopping by for one quick visit, that's fine too. Anyway, I hope you all have a great spring, and I wish you all happy stitching. Take care.